of why you should grab the bull by the horns and make your healthcare wishes known.
Hey,
So,
Chris, if I may interject, this is Dominic. Just because the deck we're using doesn't have the page number on, I tried adding it, but it was hidden in the color of the footer. Just let Rick know what slide you're on, and because it's not always apparent. And then the other thing, for anybody that's joined late, I may interrupt and ask for this. The slides are on GoToMeeting if you join via GoToMeeting, or for those of you that have dialed in on the phone, the slides are on the Reluctant Brotherhood website as well. Sorry to interrupt, Chris. I just want to make sure people can see what you're talking about.
Sure thing. Right now I'm looking at the slide titled Educate. The header is Learn from Terry Shibo and Her Family. And going back, I was just explaining why there's a sense of urgency in putting your healthcare wishes down on paper and making them known to your loved ones, because life is unpredictable, and we need to have a plan in place for that rainy day. Looking to the next slide titled Prepare with the header, what is important to you. I want to walk you through some of the things that you need to think about before you actually start taking these conversations out to your loved ones and to your doctor. We set up this public education initiative along with a website, begintheconversation.org, which is full of wonderful resources and links and information and testimonials on things that might not have occurred to you, but you need to bear in mind when you're beginning these conversations with your loved ones and your doctors and actually putting pen to paper to complete these advanced directives. So, you know, some of these things you need to consider that are important to you. You know, what are a lot of these decisions are going to come down to what your philosophy is on quality of life versus quantity of life. What your philosophy is on you know, pain toleration. Do you have a high or a low tolerance for pain? Where do you want to be? What your location is? Do you want to be at home, or do you want to be in a hospital setting? Do you want to be in some sort of a facility, or maybe even a setting? All of these things are going to help you prepare to begin the conversation with your loved ones and your doctor. And these are things that you need to consider. We've got actually a workbook on the website, begintheconversation.org, that you can download and even print if you need a hard copy. And what it does is it walks you through some of the questions that you need to ask yourself before you ever start these conversations with your loved ones and your medical team. So moving on from there, once you've got your base knowledge, once you've educated yourself, once you've prepared yourself, and you're ready to start communicating, we encourage you to start these conversations and continue them, because these are going to be fluid conversations. These are going to be, you know, philosophies and talks that change as your life changes, as your health changes, as your family dynamics change. These conversations are going to change right along with them. So I'm moving to the next slide that's titled Communicate. And you can see Kermit there talking with the doctor, and Kermit's unfortunately coming to the realization that he is just a puppet. And we understand that these are conversations that are not easily broached. And so we try and use a little bit of humor to draw people in. We try and make people understand that, hey, these are not light conversations. These are difficult, life-changing conversations in a lot of instances, and we want people to know that they need to be clear and steadfast in their commitment to themselves and in their communication with their loved ones as well as their doctor. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, who you need to communicate with. And I'm moving to the next slide, titled Communicate, with the subheader of who needs to know. Looking at that slide, I mean, that encompasses just about everyone within your sphere of influence, everyone who has an investment in your life, everyone who might play a role, no matter how large or how small, in caring for you down the road. And you can see there we've listed folks like your family members, your friends, your neighbors, your church members, caregivers, your physicians, your clergy. If you have an attorney or financial advisors, you want to include those folks as well. Essentially what we want is everyone to be on the same page and crystal clear with what your wishes are, because we want to avoid any of the infighting among family members, friends. We don't want any of the rumors swirling around in church or the neighborhood or anything like that. We want everyone on the same page with what your plan of care is. So when that rainy day comes, it's just a matter of carrying out that plan of care. And the focus is on you and how we are caring for you, and not this argument with the crazy cousin who came in town from 3 states away to shake things up. So when you're communicating, make sure you're reaching a wide group of folks who count or matter in your life. On the next slide, again, titled Communicate, with the subheading Remember, there's a few things that you need to bear in mind when you're beginning the conversation. And after you've done a little preparation, a little education, a little background research, and you're actually bringing these conversations to your loved ones, to your doctors, to your neighbors, your friends, your family, all of those folks. There's a few things that you need to bear in mind, and we've tried to outline them somewhat on this slide. First and foremost, these are not going to be 30-second conversations. These are not even going to be 5-minute conversations. These are going to be long, in-depth conversations with these folks about your healthcare wishes. You want to make sure that you include everyone. And if you have, for instance, a large family, and everyone gathers, at one central location for the holidays, that might be a good time to begin the conversation. So you have one large conversation rather than 20 or 30 individual conversations with your family members. Now, am I telling you to begin this conversation at the Thanksgiving dinner table or underneath the Christmas tree on Christmas morning? No. You need to select an appropriate setting. But again, if you can capture a large number of your audience, your loved ones, all at once, do that. Make it easy on yourself rather than having dozens of individual conversations. But make sure that you include everyone who might play a role in caring for you down the road. When you are communicating what your wishes are, when you are beginning these conversations, make sure you're using active listening, right? There's a reason we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. You're going to need to listen just as much as you speak in these conversations, because not everyone is going to be on board with what your wishes are right off the bat. For some people, it's going to take a little bit of explaining about how you did the research, how you are not arriving at these decisions lightly, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it is your health care, and you can take charge, and this is all about making sure your wishes are honored. These are some of the most important wishes that you'll ever lay out on the table, and we want to make sure that everyone, again, is on the same page. So make sure that you are explaining to those folks who might not be on board with what your plan of care is, what the reasons are for your thought process and so forth. Make sure you use available resources. I mentioned the Terry Schiavo case because it's a well-known case. Most people recognize at least the name and attach some meaning to it. So if you need to bring some of those folks around and explain to them why you're beginning this conversation at this point. Use the Terry Schiavo case as an illustration. Use your experiences. Maybe you've had your own personal experiences. Dominic mentioned at the top of the call there was a gentleman who did have his advance directives in place, and that was likely a blessing for him and his family. Use your available resources. If you've had a situation in your own family where a loved one has needed advance directives, or maybe it's a negative situation and you say, hey, I don't want to end up like Uncle Harold did, with the family fighting over the type of care that he got and so forth. But make sure you're communicating clearly is the bottom line, and make sure you're revisiting these conversations as you go along. So once you've had the conversations with yourself, you've looked yourself in the mirror and you know where you stand with what your wishes are, then it's time to bring the conversation to your physician, your medical team, because you want to make sure that your wishes are in line with what your physician is comfortable in providing you. And you should feel comfortable in taking your advance directives to your doctor. You can use our website as a resource to show your physician, but make sure that you and your doctor are crystal clear and on the same page with what your wishes are and what type of care that medical professional is willing and able to provide. After you've had the conversation with your physician, the last group you want to take it to is your friends, your family members, your loved ones, because you want to essentially have a good understanding of what your decisions mean and what these documents mean once you have them in place. After you've wrapped up the conversation with all those folks, then it's actually time to put pen to paper and document your healthcare wishes. And I'm looking at the next slide titled Document, and there are a couple documents that we focus on. Because we're a healthcare agency, we focus on the healthcare side of things. And these two documents we call advance directives. Essentially, you are giving a roadmap to your loved ones and to your doctor on exactly what type of care you want. And the first document to discuss with you is titled A Living Will. And a living will is a very simple, straightforward form. They do vary state to state. Here in North Carolina, a living will is all of two back and front. And a living will essentially outlines your wish to use or not use life-sustaining measures in the event that you are unable to verbalize your own healthcare wishes. This document will speak for you and, again, serve as a roadmap to your loved ones and your physician on exactly the type of care to provide you in the event you're unable to verbalize your own wishes. And when we talk about life-sustaining measures, we're talking about things like feeding tubes, talking about things like ventilators. We're talking about things like IV hydration, things that are going to sustain life, keep you alive. In a living will, you can outline your wish to use or not use those life-sustaining measures. And you can get specific in the North Carolina documents on whether or not you want to use, for instance, only a feeding tube in certain circumstances or only a ventilator in certain circumstances. You can get detailed in these documents and jot in notes. There's ample space to write in amendments and notes to the living will. But essentially, a living will is, again, your choice to use or not use life-sustaining measures. I mentioned that the living will, as well as the healthcare power of attorney, are boilerplate documents for the state that you live in. When you are completing these documents, again, it's important to remember that you do some research in advance. You have these conversations, and the last step is actually putting the pen to paper on a living will or a healthcare power of attorney. Looking to the next slide, titled Documents, there are some limitations of the living will. It does not give specific detail for all possible healthcare scenarios. There's no possible way that in one document we can capture all possible healthcare scenarios. So living will speaks in broad, general terms. But depending on the way that you fill out the form and the boxes that you tick, you can your wishes in a little bit more specificity. But know that a living will speaks in mostly generalized terms. But it is, again, a fantastic roadmap to your loved ones and to your physician on the type of care that you want. Of the living will is it can be challenged by family members or medical professionals in certain circumstances. And 99.9% of those circumstances revolve around your mental state of when you completed that document. That's when the challenges come into play. So know that there are some limitations of a living will, but it is absolutely miles ahead of no advance directive at all. Moving on to the other advance directive that we speak about and encourage folks to consider. I'm looking at the next slide here, document with the subheading Healthcare Power of Attorney. A Healthcare Power of Attorney, again, is another boilerplate state-specific document that is simple, straightforward, easy to understand concept. In North Carolina, it is all of 4 pages back and front. And a healthcare power of attorney is essentially tapping an individual to make healthcare decisions for you. Healthcare only decisions for you in the event that you are unable to make those decisions or verbalize those decisions yourself. When you're filling out a healthcare power of attorney, a few things to consider. Make sure it's someone you trust, right? Don't pick your mortal enemy who's going to pull the plug the first moment they get a chance to as your healthcare power of attorney. Make sure it's someone that you trust, someone that you've had the conversations with and is on board with what your wishes are, and someone that is comfortable in carrying out those wishes. Because these are big, heavy, and in some cases life and death decisions. Make sure it's someone who is not going to crumble under that sort of stress. Make sure it's someone who is decisive and not someone who is going to waffle on these decisions. For instance, my younger brother will never be my healthcare power of attorney because it takes him 45 minutes to pick out a jar of pickles in the grocery store. I want someone who is going to be decisive, someone who has had the conversation with me about what type of care I want, and someone who is comfortable in carrying out that plan of care. So again, a healthcare power of attorney is essentially tapping an individual to make healthcare decisions for you. Now, in the North Carolina document, you can list an A, a B, and a C team. Obviously, they're going to start with the A team. The medical professionals will see that you have a healthcare power of attorney on file, and they're going to say, oh, geez, we need to get in touch with this person. But if for some reason they are unable to reach that person, maybe the A team has healthcare issues of their own, or they're traveling and they can't be reached, then they will go on down the line to the B team and then finally the C team if necessary. It's also important to remember that, when you're completing a healthcare power of attorney, the North Carolina document you can limit the decision-making power of your healthcare power of attorney. If you, want to limit their decision-making power, you can fill out the document according to your wishes, and if you feel like you need to, you can limit the healthcare power of attorney's power, essentially. Now, a few things about these documents, and I'm now looking at the next slide, titled document, with the subheading both documents. A few things to keep in mind about the living will as well as the healthcare power of attorney is both documents are boilerplate for the state that you live in. Both documents, once they are completed, are as close to a doctor's order as you can get without going to 8 years of medical school and being a certified physician. Now, are they bulletproof? No. Are they the next best thing? Absolutely. Do they give a roadmap to your loved ones and to your doctor about what your healthcare wishes are? Certainly. And both documents in the state of North Carolina, you complete according to your wishes. You have 2 individuals sign off as witnesses, and then you get the document notarized. Then that document is official. Then that document is in play. And it's as simple as that. So again, these are very simple, straightforward documents that if you have had the conversation, if you know exactly what your wishes are, you can complete these documents in all of 15 or 20 minutes. Get them signed by a witness, get them notarized, and then these documents are official. So those are very simple, straightforward documents that provide you with peace of mind in knowing that your healthcare wishes are going to be honored. And also, it takes the burden of decision-making off of your family's shoulders. If you do not have advanced directives in place, the decision for your plan of care falls to your next of kin. And if you've never had a conversation with that person about your healthcare wishes, they are in a situation like Terry Schiavo was in. They are looking for a light switch in a pitch black room. And unfortunately, we've seen it too often in hospice care where we have 80, 90-plus-year-old hospice patients who have never once had conversations with their loved ones or their doctor about what type of care they want at end of life. And that's exactly why Lower Cape Fear Hospice developed to begin the conversation education initiative. We saw it in person, up close, and in an ugly fashion in some cases with some families. So we said we need to nip this in the bud and get these folks educated. Now, once you complete your living will or your healthcare power of attorney, there are other documents to consider when you're continuing the conversation with your loved ones. There are a lot of issues we understand that swirl around these types of decisions. There are a lot of questions and concerns ranging from legal and financial to, eye and organ and body donation to funeral arrangements and burial versus cremation. There are lots of issues swirling around, begin the conversation. And we want to make sure that you are touching on some of those issues when you're having these conversations with your doctor and your loved ones. So looking at the next slide titled document and the subheading other documentation, you can see there we've listed a DNR, a do not resuscitate, as another advance directive. You can make decisions in advance about your choices to be an eye or an organ or tissue donor. You can make advanced plans on what you want as far as maybe burial versus cremation, what you want as far as funeral services and memorial services, and you need to obviously consider your legal and financial matters. But again, because we are a healthcare agency, we focus on the healthcare documents specifically the advanced directives such as the living will and the healthcare power of attorney. But know that there are other issues swirling around that need to be included in this conversation. And I'll point you to our website, begintheconversation.org, for some more detail and information on that. We've created a workbook that goes into and addresses just about all of the issues that will confront us at some point in life. Looking at the next slide, once you've begun the conversation and you've discussed your wishes with yourself, your loved ones, and your physician, the next step is to act. And I'm looking at the slide titled Act and the subheading Now What. Make sure that you share these documents with your loved ones for a few reasons. A lot of questions I get about, advanced directives revolve around where should I store my advanced directives? Where should I keep them? And some people say, hey, I'm going to keep them in my safe deposit box at the bank where I keep all of my other important financial and legal documents. That is about the last place that you want to keep an advanced directive like a living will or a healthcare power of attorney, because medical professionals want the original copy right there, front and center, in front of their faces at the time of the need. Now, you're going to want to obviously give a copy to your physician of your advanced directive, be it a living will or a healthcare power of attorney. Take the original copy to your physician, right, and ask them to scan it in to become a part of your medical towards electronic medical records throughout medicine, which allows for ease of scanning in things like these advanced directives so they can be made available whenever and wherever. So bring that original copy to your doctor and ask for it to be scanned in to your medical record. You keep the original document yourself. Now keep it someplace handy and easily accessible in a time of crisis. Now, some people keep it on their bedside table. Some people keep it on the refrigerator next to the A+ paper from the grandson. I've even heard of people keeping it inside the refrigerator because the refrigerator is fireproof. Wherever you keep it, make sure that it is easily accessible and well known to your loved ones so that they can reach it in a time of crisis. Do not keep these documents in your safe deposit box at the bank. It will do you no good there if you're the only one with the key to the safe deposit box and you're in a time of crisis. Make sure that you are continuing the conversation. Make sure that you are updating your advanced directive. The beauty of these documents, the living will and the healthcare power of attorney, is once you complete them, they are good forever. They are good until you say otherwise, right? But you can scrap the document and update it at any time you choose. So if you have a life-altering experience, if your philosophy changes based on an experience you have with a friend or a family member that you see firsthand, you can scrap these advanced directives and update them at any time. And it's just as simple as getting a hold of an advanced directive, completing it according to your wishes, getting it witnessed and notarized, and then taking it to your doctor to have it scanned in as part of your medical record. It's just that simple. So make sure that you are continuing the conversation, especially if you're tapping someone to be your healthcare power of attorney. Make sure you are aware of what your latest healthcare wishes are. All right? Last thing I want to point your attention to is the next slide titled Act. You've got a cartoon of a scenario that plays out in my household at least nightly, where the wife and the husband are having a discussion about end-of-life care, and the wife pulls the plug on the television, So make sure that you try and use or incorporate a little bit of humor, because we understand, again, these are difficult conversations that people run away from rather than flocking to. So make sure that you act and use a little bit of humor when you're trying to broach this subject. Again, the next slide here, titled Empower. Again, all good gifts should be empowered, or all good gifts should be shared. And this is a gift that you are giving to yourself. Again, you're giving yourself the gift of peace of mind and knowing that your wishes are going to be honored. You're also giving your family, as well as your medical team, the gift of knowledge and knowing exactly what type of care you want, and taking that very heavy burden of these difficult decisions off of their shoulders and putting them in your hands where they belong, because at the end of the day, this is your health care and your wishes need to be honored. So with that, I will wrap it up and open it up to any questions that folks have.
Hey, Chris, thank you so much. That was really good. Rick, if you can unmute everybody's line, and we will open it up for questions. I just want to make a couple comments. Chris is here, of course, with me in North Carolina, and every state has different nuances. I know one of the guys on Inspire posted something about the state of Illinois has a booklet called the 5 Wishes booklet. So and that is something that an individual fills out, give it to their healthcare provider, and they can, like Chris said, scan that into your health record so that they're aware of your wishes.
5 wishes is wonderful. I encourage everyone to utilize the 5 wishes. Absolutely.
I'm sorry, there's a lot of background noise. If I could just ask people to kind of limit their movement if possible. Who commented on the 5 wishes?
Oh, that was me. It was Chris.
Okay.
And I've utilized the 5 wishes, and it is a great resource, and it goes into a lot more detail than most people would even consider.
Great. Thanks, Chris. The other thing that was noted, and then I'm going to turn it over to others on the call here, is that there are things that sometimes we forget about. We've all heard stories where a specific spouse does all the finances in the family, and passes away, and the other spouse doesn't know what to do, doesn't know what bills are paid, doesn't know their system, doesn't know their passwords. Chris focused mainly on the healthcare side of things, living will and healthcare power of attorney, but sharing those kinds of things with your spouse. Just the other day, I use a password system because I can't remember crap. I use a system called Dashlane, and there are many other password management systems out there, but it gave me the ability to share my passwords and sites with my wife. And I know there are other systems like that out there, whether it's a piece of paper or whatever. Those are things that will make your significant other, your spouse, your family, whomever, make their life a lot easier. God forbid something should happen to you. So I'm going to be quiet and open it up to the floor for any comments or questions. Who's got a plan in place already?
This is Ken Mason. I do.
Good.
Who else?
Ken, did you have a question?
Well, I was listening to Scott, and
Chris,
I don't know if I'm being contrary, but Scott, everyone doesn't have a really good family unit, and in terms of sharing, your final wishes, I know of some people that don't want to tell their families. They could care less because they know that if they begin to tell their family what their final wishes are, what they want done, how they want it done, they're going to get a lot of crap. They're going to get a lot of negative feedback. And I can appreciate where you're coming from, but, you know, not all families are as kind and considerate as you've made them out to be.
This is Chris, and yes, that's absolutely true. We live in a time where there are blended families, and you know, absolutely not everyone is going to be around the campfire singing "Kumbaya" when you have these conversations with them. And I'll give you an example. One of my coworkers passed away about a year ago, and she did not have a close relationship with her family, and she went so far as to making a very close friend and neighbor her healthcare power of attorney, because she felt closer to that person than any family member that was involved. And you know, I completely understand and agree that not every family unit is functional, and in those cases, you know, it's, I think, important to if you're going to choose a healthcare power of attorney, especially, to choose someone that you are ultimately comfortable with, to choose someone that, you know, you are confident in. And if that doesn't happen to be a family member, so be it. It can be a friend, it can be a neighbor, someone you go to church with, the guy you play cards with on Friday night. It can be any one of those people. But for other people, it's going to be a family member. So I understand absolutely that not everyone is going to be having these conversations with their family members. The most important part is that you have these conversations with yourself, with your physician, and then with anyone who is going to be involved in your life and possibly caring for you down the road.
You know, I just want to give an example of that, because most of you know that I just lost my good buddy Jerry Cornelia, and Jerry lived on his own. His family, he's not particularly close to his family, and the family he is close to are like second cousins. And he appointed his buddy Tony Taccone, his longtime buddy, as his he gave him his healthcare power of attorney. Tony has won. He's the director of Berkeley Rep. He's won Tony Awards. He's a very, very capable guy and a manager and an organizer, and he was phenomenal throughout the process in arranging and organizing everything. And towards the very end, we got his niece involved, because he didn't really want his niece involved too early. But I mean, that's a good example of Jerry thinking ahead of time. Now, where he didn't think ahead of time is he didn't put all his passwords and what have you in a certain place, so we can't switch his computer off. and you know, he's a very, very fine artist, and so we're in there in the studio still trying to catalog all his work, but nobody wants to switch the computer off because they don't know if we'll be able to get back to it. But you know, there are a lot to think about. There are a lot of issues to think about. Just an
And this is Chris again, and that reminds me of, you know, there's no possible way that we can think of everything, all of the loose ends, so to speak, that we need to address. But again, going back to the 5 Wishes booklet, and again on the Begin the Conversation website, we've put together a very in-depth workbook that helps people address some of these things, like passwords for computers, that no one would have ever, that would have never occurred to you know, your most people, to put down on paper and give to your loved ones, for future use. So again, I really, really encourage you to use this as a springboard to do some research of your own. Visit the website, the Begin a Conversation website. If you don't obviously live in North Carolina, there is a map of the United States. You click on the state, and it links you to advanced directives for that particular state. So, you know, check out the workbook. Check out the website. 5 Wishes, again, is a wonderful, wonderful in-depth resource.
Thanks a lot, Chris. That's really great. Anybody else have any questions, comments?
Yes, Dominic, this is Len. I have a question for Chris.
Go ahead, Len.
So, if you assign someone to be your healthcare power of attorney, and then you become incapacitated, is it possible for legally for them to subvert any of your documented wishes?
I'm sorry, say that again?
If you assign someone healthcare power of attorney and you become incapacitated, and they then, is it possible for them to subvert your documented wishes?
This is Chris. Okay. Is it possible for them to subvert your healthcare wishes? It depends on how you have completed that healthcare power of attorney. I mentioned that in the North Carolina healthcare power of attorney document, you can limit the decision-making power of your healthcare power of attorney. And you can limit it to, okay, I only want my healthcare power of attorney to make decisions on non-life-sustaining measures. So things like, you know, do I want, you know, pain medications and so forth. So you can get specific in the healthcare power of attorney, at least in the North Carolina form, where you can limit the decision-making power of your healthcare power of attorney. You can also grant that healthcare power of attorney carte blanche. And if you grant that healthcare power of attorney carte blanche, they are in charge of all of your healthcare decisions. So if you've had the conversations with your healthcare power of attorney, and you believe that your healthcare power of attorney is you, and then when that rainy day comes and you need that healthcare power of attorney to make those decisions for you, ultimately they can make whatever decision they want if you grant them carte blanche. Now, the backup measure, or the fail-safe measure there, is hopefully you have had conversations with your medical team, with your physician, on the type of care that you want. And if your healthcare power of attorney is going completely against the grain on what your wishes are, then the healthcare power of attorney can be challenged in those circumstances. So the answer is yes and no. There are, you know, that fail-safe measure in place. You can limit the decision-making power of your healthcare power of attorney. But if you grant them carte blanche in how you complete the document, then they are making healthcare decisions for you. So a little bit of yes and a little bit of no on being able to subvert your healthcare wishes. I mentioned that these are not bulletproof documents, but they are a guide. They are as close to it as you can get.
Len, this is Ken again. Is there a particular item or area or thing that you are concerned about?
No, it's a hypothetical question.
And this is Chris again.
If that could be spelled out.
Yes, thank you.
And this is Chris again. And you know, there are countless hypotheticals that we can go into, and unfortunately, the limitation of documentation is we can't go into all of the possible scenarios. But I've got a healthcare power of attorney for the state of North Carolina here, and it is again 4 pages back and front, and in section 5, special provision.
You broke up, Chris.
Yep.
We lost him.
I think we lost Chris.
As Chris said before, I mean, there are a myriad of things that come into play. The important thing is having at least a baseline plan with your major wishes, so that you don't get in a position like the Terry Schiavo example. And so, sorry we lost Chris there.
I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can now.
Now we can.
You can hear me now? This
Yeah.
is Chris.
Yep.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'll try that again real quick, just for the healthcare power of attorney question about subversion. Anyways, in the healthcare power of attorney for the state of North Carolina, I'm looking at the document right now, and in Section 5, Section 5 is titled Special Provisions and Limitations. And Section 5 reads, the authority granted in this document is intended to be as broad as possible so that your healthcare agent will have authority to make any decisions you could make or obtain or terminate any type of healthcare treatment or service. If you wish to limit the scope of your healthcare agent's powers, you may do so in this section. So know that most healthcare power of attorneys have a section where you can limit the decision-making power.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at Connecticut as an example, Len. And I went to the begintheconversation.org, and there is a very detailed booklet where you can document all your choices. And having done this with my attorney in Connecticut, the sky's the limit at what you can designate for your representatives. So, but there's some very good content there. And so I, encourage you to look at that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chris, this is Ken again. I'm sorry, I don't want to bogart the conversation or anything, but the support group here in Lincoln, bite it, Jet. This support group in Nebraska, this RN lady, she has what she calls death, DEATH, cafes, and she advertises them, and basically it's getting a group of strangers talk about what end of life means and finding out whether or not you've made plans for it. And what I found is that a lot of people say that when they go to these things, it's like a first step on their path to doing something that they have always thought of as being very unpleasant and very yucky, but that they've got to do. And the more of these death cafes they go to, the more firm they become in what they want, what they're looking for, and what they want to accomplish by having an end-of-life directive. And one other thing that you said about keeping a copy of papers around, I knew these people one time that, and it sounds kind of funny, but they put all the medical records in the final directives into a picture frame and framed it and had it in their bedroom.
This is Chris, and I've never heard of framing your advance directives, but I will. I will incorporate that in a future presentation. That's clever. I like that.
Couldn't miss it.
And yes, can't miss it, right. And going back to your comment about the death cafes, yes, at Lower Cape Fear Hospice, I host a Begin the Conversation educational clinic on the first Friday of every month. And the goal is, again, to get people like yourself to take that first step on this path. And the death cafes actually, I believe, originated in Europe, where for everything that I've heard, they are much more comfortable in discussing end-of-life care and death and dying and so forth. But those are wonderful steps on an ongoing conversation that you need to have with yourself and your loved ones. So that's a fantastic idea, and I'm glad to hear that it's going on in that area.
Yeah, my mom and dad had the DNR framed in their bedroom. Good idea.
I've heard of people taping them to their, the foot of their bed and above their bed, and yes, I've heard of some people keeping their advance directives, DNRs, living wills, you name it, in some unusual places, to say the least.
Hey, this is Tom Van Zandt. I wanted to make a comment about if you name a person to be in charge of carrying out your medical directives, be very careful that that person has the strength of character to do what you have selected, because you can get a lot of pushback from the medical community. They want their goal is to extend life as long as possible, no matter what, using all available measures. And I've seen incidents where they don't like it if you say, well, I want to withhold this and I don't want to use that. And they don't like it a lot, and they'll put a lot of guilt on the person making the decision.
Yeah, but as Chris says, though, one of the things that Chris repeated was that you make multiple copies of your final directives, and you don't just give it to your best friend who's going to carry it out. You give it to your doctor so that the doctor already knows what you want. And hopefully, if the doctor's going to give you crap, he'll do it while you're there in the office and alive and kicking, and you can tell the doctor, eat shit. This is my life. This is what I want done. If you won't do it, I'll get another doctor.
And Tom, I don't know if you heard it, but Chris mentioned you don't designate somebody who's not strong. It's got to be the right personality. I know my mother-in-law went through this with my father-in-law, and as you say, she was pressured to do extraordinary things that he did not want, and they do play on guilt, and they want to do anything they can, extraordinary measures to save the person, but it was not his wishes. But it is stressful. That's why it's important to socialize this with your team, your family, your friends, so that they know and have it documented. And you have the right healthcare power of attorney.
Just so everyone knows, there can be some extremely tough calls that you have to make as the person in charge of the healthcare power of attorney.
Absolutely. It's called death.
Yeah, but it leads up to death. But I mean, there's things such as withholding a feeding tube, which is going to create death when the doctors won't do it, or withholding a respirator machine, and the doctors tell you should do it, and you have to say no.
This is Chris. Just real quickly, this is Chris, and yes, you're exactly right. There are very heavy, big, difficult decisions to make, and yes, you're absolutely right. Medical professionals take an oath to do everything they possibly can to save and improve and sustain life, and in some cases, withholding life-sustaining or removing life-sustaining measures cuts against that oath, and it's difficult for some medical professionals to carry out those wishes. But at the end of the day, if you have had the conversations, you do have the advance directives in place. Hopefully, you've had the conversation with your loved ones as well as your doctor, and most of those people will have at least a photocopy of what your advance directives are. I think that a reasonable medical professional would come around and understand that. But yes, you're right there. There are times when medical professionals will lay the guilt trip on, and it's important then that healthcare agent, whoever it might be, is strong and steadfast in carrying out what your wishes are. So I don't dispute that at all. It happens, and it's unfortunate, but these are difficult decisions. And a lot of times the healthcare professionals are doing their due diligence. We live in a very litigious society, and doctors don't want to do something that is perceived as wrong and then get sued for it on down the road. So a little bit of it is, that oath that they take. A little bit of it is, hey, I don't want to do anything wrong by this patient. And a little bit of it is, hey, I don't want to be caught up in a legal battle down the road based on the care that I'm providing or withholding from this patient. So absolutely, it is not black and white. It is not cut and dry. They are difficult decisions.
Yeah, I could tell you horror stories, but I won't waste your time. I wanted to ask a question about putting payable on death on a bank account. Did you already cover that? I came in late.
I'm sorry, say that again about a bank account?
Putting the term payable on death on a bank account.
Payable on death.
I had that happen where my father died, and he was in the state of New Jersey. And when he died, he had payable on death on his bank account, to whoever he wanted to get the money. And the money just transferred with, outside of his estate. It just transferred immediately to those people.
That sounds like it was set up through a financial planner or estate planner, or possibly even some type of durable power of attorney, which handles financial-only decisions. I'm not going to pretend that I'm well-versed in the financial side of things. Again, I focus on the healthcare side of things. But if you're looking for more information about those financial decisions and durable power of attorneys, I would really encourage you to talk with a financial planner and a estate planner. We've got a little bit of information on the Begin the Conversation website to links that you can get those types of answers. I don't want to shoot you in the wrong direction, so I'm just not certain about that.
Hi, this is Jim Venice. If you end up in a facility outside of, like I live in Florida and I spend a lot of time in New Jersey, my paperwork is in Florida. If I got sick in New Jersey and ended up in a facility here, would the paperwork be honored?
Tough to say. Some states honor other states' advance directives. Some states do not. For those of you who split time in two locations, I encourage you to make sure that you have advance directives in both locations. Cover all of your bases. Make sure you've got advance directives in Florida and as well as in New Jersey. So if you happen to be in a crisis in New Jersey and you want your advance directives, make sure that you have them completed for that state, because I would hate it if New Jersey for some reason doesn't honor Florida's advance directives. And you know what? It's just like Florida to not honor or be honored in other states. And I can say that as a true Floridian.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Well, Chris, I know you put in a long day at the office, as many guys on the phone here, those that are still working. And unless we have any more questions, I'm going to wrap up our call. And thanks, Chris, again for doing this. I hope those of you on the call that don't have a your power of attorney person is in a different situation. In my case, my brother had a stroke. You know, that you update your plan and you start to think about these things and socialize it with your family, and be as prepared as we can, because you never know. Like the story I told up front, our friend with advanced prostate cancer, getting in a motorcycle accident, and now he's in his final hours. So you never know when tragedy can strike, and you have a plan in place for your family. And if anybody has suggestions for Rick and I for future fifth week topics, please send us an email. Was there a question? I guess not.
Okay.
Rick, do you have anything to add?
No, that's it. Just to thank Chris for a great presentation. We will try to get the audio up. Dom and I both apologize. We started the audio a little bit late when Chris was already talking about Terry Schiavo. But we have most of the presentation, and what we don't have, there are some good slides. But we will ask John Teisberg, who I don't know if he's still on, but he joined us earlier.
Yep, I am.
Oh, John, if you can, I'll work with you, or maybe you can figure out how we can post the audio. The audio is still running.
Can do.
And that's it.
All right, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. And just to reiterate Dom's request, if any of you think you have a good topic for a plenary session, let us know, and we'll try and make it happen. Thank you,
Okay,
everybody.
thank you.
Have a good 4th of
Thanks,
July,
everyone.
everybody.
Appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Thanks very much,
Bye-bye.
Chris.
Good night.
Thanks, Chris.
Yes, Dominic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.